I think the most important advice I can give to any separating or transitioning service member would be to prepare yourself.
I think the advice that I would give somebody trying to transition into the federal workforce is just you have to really do your homework on just the initial process.
I think that's probably one of the biggest things, knowing, hey, it doesn't happen overnight. Like you working at McDonald's, it's a process, and being able to understand that process.
I expected that they would jump all over me. I expected that the resume that I had would be very marketable, and that if I filled out 5 applications, I would get, 5 callbacks. But that wasn't the case.
Learn all you can if you're interested in pursuing a career with the federal government and civil service. Learn all you can about the federal employment process, the application process, resume format.
Now looking at it, it was the resume. It was kind of how I presented things at the time. I remember my father saying that nobody wants to eat a steak out of the trash can. So it's all about presentation.
Let everybody know your skill set and what you can do for people, and understand that it probably takes a period of time to be hired.
First and foremost, where can you go to look for federal employment opportunities? Well, you should check with your unit's career development officer or your career development center. That's always a very good source of employment opportunities. But you should definitely check www.usajobs.gov. The USA Jobs website, run by the Office of Personnel Management, is the government's premier jobs website. Pretty much almost every agency that goes outside its own workforce to hire for federal positions posts their positions on USA Jobs. Definitely going to want to check that out. We'll detail the USA Jobs search process here in just a few moments. If you're looking for student opportunities or internships or cooperative education opportunities, things like that, you can go to www.studentjobs.gov. Run by the same folks as run USA Jobs. You'll see a very similar interface, but the jobs on studentjobs.gov are tailored toward student opportunities. That makes some sense, doesn't it? And finally, another one-stop shop for helping find federal jobs and internships is www.makingthedifference.org. And finally, if you're interested in a particular federal agency, often that agency will list its particular and specific employment opportunities on its own website. If you are interested in working for the Department of Justice, the Department of Justice website would also be a good place to check for employment opportunities. Almost every federal department or agency has its own careers section on their websites, so it's important to check there too. So what should you expect during this process? This is a question I get asked a lot. I've evaluated, I think at last count, over 500,000 resumes for federal employment, and I get asked a lot of questions by candidates. And the first question I usually get is, where should I go to search? The second question I usually get is, what should I expect during the process? Well, I will tell you that applying for a federal job does require some time and special attention to detail. We have a number of requirements that you might not find in other employee or employer opportunities out in the private sector. But I will tell you that the rewards are absolutely worth it. Again, if you can navigate the process, if you can get through and get that first job, you'll be in for a career filled with opportunity, filled with development, and really filled with meaning, because federal employment is a highly meaningful and I think a highly professional career. Now, procedures do vary across federal agencies. I'd like to be able to tell you there is one single method of applying for all federal jobs. There's one single method we use to evaluate candidates, but that's not the case. Nor should it really be the case, because different federal agencies emphasize different characteristics and different competencies. So we want to allow them to have the flexibility to evaluate things differently. So procedures are going to vary. And federal jobs are highly desirable, and as a result, they're often very competitive. I'll be honest with you, it's not unusual for an entry-level position to get literally hundreds, if not thousands, of qualified applicants for a particular position. Now, as we go up in the ranks and as we get to some of the more experienced positions, generally those numbers fall off quite a lot. But even for the entry-level positions, there are a number of opportunities available. there are going to be a wide variety of these opportunities in the near future as more and more federal employees retire. So even though it's a highly competitive process, by doing some of the things we're going to talk about in a few moments, you can help better your chances of making it through that process. Now, there are some differing requirements for a federal resume that go above and beyond what you might be used to when you're crafting resume documents. For instance, we have to require, for your work experience, the month and year you started and finished each one of your work experiences. We also require that you put salary information on there, and that's really a key differentiator between a federal resume and a non-federal resume, are things that we require, like salary information, month and year of start and end dates for employment. But have no fear. If you build your resume on the USA Jobs Resume Builder, you will be assured that all of the required information will be captured in your federal employment application, as USA Jobs has been specifically tailored to capture the information necessary to apply for federal jobs. So you've got that going for you if you use USA Jobs. We're going to change direction a bit now. We've moved past the federal resume. Let's talk about a common method of evaluating candidates, and that's the use of the narrative response. Agencies commonly require narrative responses, or essay-type questions, to address knowledges, skills, or abilities they desire in candidates. These can be extremely important because often they represent the primary evaluation criteria for that position. They're going to vary depending on the job, and that makes a lot of sense because the jobs themselves will vary. The requirements to do them well will vary, so the knowledge, skills, and abilities required to do that job successfully are also going to vary. And they're very similar to interview questions you might answer in person. It's just you're given the opportunity to put those answers in writing. They should provide concrete examples. They should be true examples. I know I don't have to remind you of that, but truth is an important quality here. They should include your particular possession of that knowledge, skill, or ability, your response to that question in terms of concrete actions you took, and as a rule, it can pull from your past experience or education no matter where that experience or education might have been earned, whether it be in the military service, whether it be in the private sector, whether it be in an educational environment, whether it be in an extracurricular activity, such as an interest group or a religious organization or something like that. The bottom line is, we don't care where you got it. We care if you have it and at what level. So it's important to note that your experiences you can draw upon can come from any aspect of your life. Now, I want to point out very quickly something about applicant eligibility. In every vacancy announcement, you're going to see a section that deals with applicant eligibility. And it's going to ask you a series of questions on whether you're eligible for particular special hiring authorities or other flexibilities that might be used to bring you on. I'd encourage you to look at those very carefully. If you're unclear about the qualification requirements for those specific hiring authorities, do a little bit more research, click the links that are provided on those vacancy announcements, because often these are alternative means of entry into that particular federal position, and you're going to maximize your bites of the apple, so to speak. So I'd encourage you to keep close eye on the applicant eligibility questions and answer all of those very carefully. Very important aspect of the employment process. So some summary tips on applying for the job. Plan ahead. The application process, developing these specific responses to KSAs and things like that, can take some time. So to improve your chances of getting a job, make sure you spend the appropriate time on it. Likewise, you should probably consider selecting the positions for which you apply carefully. Rather than using what I like to call the lottery method of applying for jobs, where you just scatter a resume out there for hundreds of positions that may or may not be relevant, it's always going to benefit you to take the time to winnow those down to the select few vacancies you're really interested in and really qualified for. Spend considerable quality time developing those packets and submitting them. I guarantee your results will be more positive than if you just use the lottery method and scatter resumes out for unrelated vacancies. Being specific does make a difference in your search for federal employment. I'll ask you to be patient. The evaluative process can sometimes be lengthy. Often there are 2 or 3 rounds of evaluation that have to occur, and that can take some time. So it may be some time until you hear back from the agency about the status of your position. There may be little or in some cases no communication from the agency, and additionally, if the agency has to undergo security checks, this time period could be prolonged. So be patient with us. And finally, if you have questions or if you're interested in the status of a position for which you've applied, don't hesitate to follow up with that agency using the contact information that was provided on the vacancy announcement. So what happens next? Once you've applied for a federal position, what can you reasonably expect to happen? Well, after the closing date for applications, the agency then evaluates all of the candidates' application materials. From that assessment, they develop some sort of referral list that's sent to the hiring manager for consideration. At this point, an agency manager acts very similarly, regardless of what organization he or she works for. They generally hold interviews. Some of these are structured behavioral interviews. Some of them are assessment center type interviews. But they'll generally hold interviews, and upon the completion of the interviews, the totality of the candidate's package, including their performance on the interviews, will be assessed and a selection will be made. It's really just that simple. But some jobs do require additional clearance in the form of security investigations and security clearances. So let's talk about security clearances now. Applying for jobs that require a security clearance is a 2-stage process. The first part is critically important. You have to get the job offer. But once you've gotten the job offer, you then must go through a detailed background investigation process. Now, everyone hired for a federal position does undergo a basic background check of their criminal and their credit histories. However, jobs that include access to sensitive information are generally going to require a security clearance, which requires a more intensive background investigation that begins after you've been offered the job. So generally, after you've received a job offer, but in some cases before you can actually enter on duty or come in for work on the first day, a security clearance has to be adjudicated for you. That can take some time. It's a very involved process because we have to check a number of sources and a number of references on your background. So there's a helpful hint about security clearances there. Now, to sum all of this up, folks, federal agencies have a stellar track record of hiring the best and brightest candidates. As such, getting a federal job is highly competitive. There are often many, many applications for any particular vacancy. However, that shouldn't stop you from applying, A, because you're a great candidate, and B, because we are going to have more opportunity than really ever before in the federal sector, especially for those folks who carry with them some sort of veterans preference eligibility or other creditable military service. So to increase your chances of being hired, you should follow a few clear steps, and we've outlined them already, but I'll review them here for you. You should research potential opportunities. You should consider various employment avenues, such as different hiring authorities, different agencies, and different geographic areas. You should search on the USA Jobs website as well as agency-specific websites. And you should follow the application process carefully and correctly. Doing those things will help maximize your potential for obtaining that first federal position. On behalf of the United States Office of Personnel Management, I'd like to personally thank you for viewing this session today. I hope you found it informative and enlightening, and I wish you the best of luck should you decide to consider federal employment as a career choice